It's nuts. And then what Phoenix did when she's bleeping out everybody's name.
Every single time Liff hears that verse, and it doesn't matter how many times he's heard the song, he always laughs. Like Phoenix just makes him laugh. Like she's got that great sense of humor, that lean, that like MC lean, that just, you know, I love it. I love her verse.
And it feels like, it feels like it's not the Fugees track. Maybe it's the Wyclef track. Maybe it's the Wyclef track that Lauren's on, to all the girls I've loved.
Yes, I remember that.
It reminds me of that. So it feels like a counterweight to, you know, where Clef was coming from. But
I really had to write that track. It's so funny because Liff, when we were dating, recorded me when I wrote that track. So it was kind of like this full circle moment where it's like I'm with the person I am ultimately going to spend the rest of my life with while I'm processing these past relationships. And I wanted to honor them. Like, I didn't want it to be one of those bitch fests where you're like, oh yeah, you suck. I'm like, no, like, here's all the things about these past relationships that like I like, that were great, that were cool. And now we ain't gotta be friends. Right. Like, you know, like I could just be like, yo, that was a good time, but we ain't, you know,
stop creeping on my IG. Stop doing that.
You know. But I still honor and respect the time that you had in my life, you know.
I mean, that's funny because that reminds me of It's Funny with Joel Ortiz off that last. I think it's called It's Funny.
Yeah, you got it.
And I always liked how your verse came in after his, because he's very disrespectful to women, as most rappers tend to be off of reflex, right? And you came in like, yo, bitch ain't as nice as me. That's because I'm not a bitch. I'm a grown woman that bitches described to be. That cats try to see on the low. They tell their girl they're going to check the show, and it's me. They check the phone. This track connected to. It's funny to me in that way. It's like, oh wow, look at this. Look at more description around this one.
Yo, I was in Europe on tour. I probably told you this 10 years ago. I was in Europe on tour with like Bahamadia, Invincible, Roxanne Shante when Joelle sent that verse in. So Moss was orchestrating that. And so they all heard it like raw, uncut. And they literally were like, you can't put that on your album. Like the Joelle verse. They were like, that's disrespectful. You can't put that on the album. Like, you got to stand up for yourself. And I had a real crisis of, I don't know what. Like, I was like, yo, am I like a sellout if I put this verse on my record? But then the route that I chose to take is to address it directly.
Yeah. And I thought that was dope. It was really
dope. Thank you.
So, and A Wonderful World, right? And one, you referenced robots in there as well. You have a line in there like the wonderful world of robots, right? And so that brought me back to that first quote. But you know, from a parent's perspective, I'm really interested in this line that you have. Corona just cemented what already is. Already kids can text better than they can converse with their friends.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a 2-year-old now, you know. Yeah. Is he one of these kids that touches a book and tries to swipe it? You know, like,
I'm
don't know how to
surprised,
open books anymore.
Yeah, he does. He does different things, but similar. I think I've been very trying to keep him off of screens. It's not that he doesn't play with them at all, but he doesn't have much screen time at all. The first 2 years of his life, we tried to not even put him in front of a television, like ever. And so I don't know how that's going to translate, because it's at one point, I mean, the whole world, that you'd have to live on a farm in the middle of nowhere off the grid to not be using screens. But I've just tried to give him time for his brain to develop and nurture, and his social skills and all that, without being hyper connected. This was something that I was really concerned and aware of before I ever had children, like just the impact of screen time specifically on the development of children socially and mentally and even physically. And so I'm not anti-screens, it's just how we use them can be abused and really impact children. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting navigating that as they get older, for sure.
You know, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and we were having a debate about whether all these, you know, technology taking over everything, if that will lead to increased mental illness in kids in future generations. I know we're seeing it now in our generation to a degree. We're definitely seeing it in the generation behind millennials, Generation Z. We definitely see it there. I tend to think that as more generations come up with this dependence on screens, we'll be able to teach kids how to maintain their mental health through the screens in different ways, in ways that we're not good at yet. I mean, my parents didn't grow up with all these screens. Right. So when I'm getting a little aggy about something I'm seeing on IG, they can't be like, they really can't tell me how to deal with it. You know, I'm a millennial, we're analog and digital, but Generation Z is the first one that's all digital. So half of us can kind of describe, but we're surprised that these kids are running into it. I think Generation Z will be a lot better with their kids. Yeah,
I do know that there's strengths. There's amazingly dope things that can be birthed creatively out of these generations that are screen based. I just I think it's about the quantity, the quality, the amount of time, and how we're also connecting in real life. It's just the isolation that occurs often when we have these relationships that we feel are real, but are really just on screens. The isolation really leads to a lot of mental health stuff for all of us, for adults as well, but especially for a developing like young 12, 13, 14-year-olds. So these are the things that, yes, you're right. I hope they do adjust and remedy.
My grandmother passed away 2 years ago now. We were really close. She was in Coney Island. And she was funny to me because she loved Facebook. I mean, it took me 15 years to get her online. And when she got on, she couldn't get her off.
Yeah.
And I have this video of her talking about, I love Facebook. When I'm alone, I just go to Facebook and see all my friends. And that's just felt like such an alpha and omega thing. Like,
yeah, it's very beautiful. Like there's people that are isolated that are now less isolated because of screens, such as the older generation, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that too, and FaceTime for people that are in homes and that like don't see their loved ones that are all over. Now they feel like they're actually connecting with them. So yeah, it's that double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It's like that superpower. You still gotta know how to wield it.
You gotta know how to wield it. That's what everything is. It's all about.
I love that about your grandmother. That's dope.
Yeah, she's so funny. I mean, she was amazing. She was super funny. I have this video of her. I put her in a breakdown, and it was about Tech Nine, whether Tech Nine could be the GOAT. And my argument was that no one can really be the greatest if they don't pass the grandma test. Right? And so, like, you know, just because you're in Forbes doesn't mean grandma knows who you are. And so I have this interview with my grandma and I'm reading the Forbes list. I'm like, do you know who Jay-Z is? She's like, yeah, I know Jay-Z and Beyonce. Do you know Kanye? Yeah, I know Kanye. Do you know Tech Nine? Who? You know, she had no idea who it was. And shout out to Strange Music, man. Big shout out to Travis and Tech. They sent my grandma the full Tech Nine collection.
Did they really?
Yeah. So I have this.
Did she listen?
She listened to the first one. I think she listened to one and just went back to Joel Osteen and to the Word.
Joel
Osteen. She went back to the Word channel after that. But I'm just picturing her holding up these albums. You know what I mean? And that's strictly a product of technology. So.
Yo, I can't like have you talk about your grandma and not talk about my grandma, because my grandma was like my best friend and the love of my life. And she was pretty serious, very spiritual, very humble. But at the end of her life, she got mad. She got funny, like funny. And one of my favorite quotes she ever said to me that I'll never forget. So she knows I rap, right? And she reads the newspaper. She says, so I've been reading a lot. This is like 10 years ago or maybe a little bit longer. She's like, I've been reading a lot about this guy named T.I. She's like, is he a friend of yours? And I'm like, well, no, Grandma, I know who he is, but he doesn't know who I am. We've never met. She's like, well, he seems to have gotten in some sort of trouble. I'm like, yes, he was. She's like, what happened? I said, well, he was caught trying to sell or get rid, whatever, a lot of guns. And she looks at me very dead serious and says, but why so many? One will suit every occasion. She said one will suit every occasion. I loved her, man. She was hilarious.
Oh man, she's right.
Yeah. She was like, but why so many?
Why so many? Sometimes you gotta prove a point, I guess. I don't know, Grandma. It's a good question.
She should tell T.I., you know, one. Just all you need is one gun.
next time I run into Tip, I'm gonna be like, yo, why'd you need one gun? That's so funny.
Yeah, she was the best.